returning to the scheduled viewing of the Adventures of the Pilgrims of Solomon Kane. Yes. So anyway, in the last part, they'd actually worked out that the necromancer might well have dropped his book into the lake, and they'd also worked out that people started to disappear over the weeks, sort of very set times, and also that little children were dying, and that Bridget Moores was originally convicted of being a witch because she was, they found pagan symbology within her house, which of course they believed to be the writings of scripture of the devil. Now, they all have different plans about what's going on. It's getting on to late evening. Late evening comes, and before late evening comes, they come and have a conversation with the fisherman, who talks about fishing out the odd ring and whatnot. Funnily enough, the fish are fat, the fish are healthy. He's never fished out any clothing of the women or anything like that. Which, of course, the fisherman Methuselah don't ask about the name. He hasn't really even thought of. These are good fishing waters. I love my job at the lake. Of course, to the heroes, this is tweaking that something's again is still not quite right. The pirate, who quickly finds out he can't actually swim, which was common for the time, but still amusing when he sort of dived into the water and realised that swim did not come off survival. There was an actual swim skill. However, he tied himself to a rope, which was fortunate for him. He dived down, and on a raise on his non-existent swimming roll, he was very bloody lucky. He did manage to grip something leathery. He brought it up, and it was indeed the book. It was the book opened on a seam where it did indeed look like a page had been roughly torn. Now, all the ink was smeared and water damaged, and they're all thinking, well, this can't possibly be a book of magic. Obviously, it would be too well kept for that. Now, magic is very fickle. Eventually, after much deliberation, they decided to burn the book. They even set it up with a little gunpowder just to speed it on its way. I don't quite understand that, but I suppose because it was wet. And indeed, it does indeed up in flames, which you would not expect a wet book to do anyway. However, just again for a split second, the flame flashes a dark black purple, and in that moment they know this was more than a simple book. However, they do think, and I really appreciate this for them as role players. Their characters think that it might have been something to do with the ink or the binding or something that could have changed the flame, some sort of chemical. But they're suspicious at this point. And three of them, the woodsman, the professor, and the pirate, decide at this point to go back to the inn for the night. However, Cassavir Dara has got a different answer. She wants to go and talk to the priest and see if she can find out anything about it. And also, being the least offensive, I should think, person in their initial encounter with Magnus over poor sort of Gwen, she's actually received quite well. Magnus at the time is found in the church, basically just setting up a gathering. I really don't know what they're called. And basically, Cassavir sort of sits in the stands and sort of head bowed as if praying for a moment, just to see exactly what he's doing. And finally, when she does question him, Magnus is completely set in his convictions that these girls were witches and that he saved them, he purified their souls. And in the end, she can't really find anything. Sorry, Cassavir. She's played by our female member of the group, which is why I keep alternating between the gender of Cassavir. Cassavir is a he. She's played by a she. He's played by a she. Anyway, Cassavir at this point, he really can't find anything to actually. I'm losing my words. Yeah, she can't find anything to tie in the priest to what's going on at the moment. However, when she goes home, at this point it's night. There are some oil lamps and whatnot sort of glowing through the windows. What she sees is the rear quarters of a black cat disappearing through the upstairs window of a house on the square. Immediately afterwards, there's a scream, a shriek, followed by because she made a very good notice roll, a very soft gurgling coming from just inside the open window. In a rush, Cassavir goes and rouses Magnus, the priest. And as a priest of a village, who is actually quite stockily built, he charges in through the woman's door, screams upstairs, and then stops in fright as he spies the cat above the cot of a babe. The woman lying twitching and quivering, pale as a ghost on the floor, who was obviously in the process of breastfeeding the poor child. And the cat itself is crouched, its yellow eyes flecked with red. A tendril of what can only be described, its eyes flecked with red, and between linking its mouth to the baby's is a sort of swirling whitish tendril that seems to be sucking into the cat's mouth. Now, of course, Casavir he's seen things before. He is certainly not going to be sort of stunted by fear. He rushes forward, takes his long sword, and skewers the cat off the child, and throws it into the fire. As soon as this happens, the child, who was basically what looked like paralysed before, sort of colour rushed back into the baby's cheeks, and he begins to cry. And the mother, who was currently twitching on the floor, she calms, coming back to her senses. And the long and the short is that Casavir is hailed as a hero. Along with his adventurers and whatnot, backed up by Magnus and the woman, a hero who has saved them from the tyranny of this black cat and whatnot. Which poses the question: were the three women witches after all? Now then, this isn't where the tale ends. Basically, the day after this, they've already come to the conclusion at this point, or they come to the theory that in actual fact two things may be happening at once. The very next day, basically when they're still getting over their victory hangovers in the inn, the heroes are a very nervous, twitchy little man in robes and whatnot, walks to the door, and he comes to them, and he greets himself as an astronomer, a man of science of the stars. And of course, Professor Godspell greets him wholeheartedly as a man of his sort of world. This is all good. However, he reveals that I'm an astronomer. My tower is just outside of town. I shouldn't say much here. I'm really not liked round here. They think my telescopes and whatnot are witchcraft. It's absurd, but yes. Please come to my tower this evening, and there's something I must show you. I fear that disappearances have not yet stopped. Of course, they invite him for a drink and whatnot, but he refuses to sit down. And eventually, having already dropped the hint that he's not well liked, the woodsman, sort of intimidating as he is, he's a good bloke. He sort of escorts the astronomer back, who is actually called Aramis Lember, to a tower that, quite frankly, although it's obviously a tower he uses for his astronomy, it wouldn't be a far-flung thing to think that these local peasants, good God, it magnifies things, it's witchcraft, and oh my God, it's a tower, he must be some sort of wizard or, warlock or something. It's not a far-fetched idea. And the woodsman, having been denied entry to the tower for now until this evening, creates himself a little fire and keeps watch. However, back at the inn, about a mere half hour later, a peasant dashes into the front doors, bursts them off, practically bursts them off their hinges, not really, and he cries out, "Quick! Come quickly! Something terrible has happened! Magnus! He's dead!" etc. Sort of in this panic voice. And of course the heroes rush into the temple. Indeed, it's true. The small gathering of people are standing around the altar, and there upon it, with his hands still clutching the dagger, still clutching the implement, is Magnus with a dagger that he's apparently thrust through his own heart, blood dripping from the altar. And beside him, slightly coated in his own sort of essence, is a note that I actually did, just on the spur of the moment thing. I just did a prop, which reads: "I write this by way of apology and explanation for my actions. The Lord's work is complete, and for the gravity of my own sins and personal misgivings, my faith shall be tested by the supreme punishment. My corpse shall know no grave, but the cleansing virtue of holy fire. Over time I pray that the Almighty will deem my solitude in the wasted realms of purgatory a fitting penance, and by his virtue assent within his loving embrace. Yours, Reverend Magnus Roderick. But basically, sorry, this is just a bit of an off thing, but of course, in the face of the time, suicide was, and I know this sounds a bit ridiculous, a cardinal sin. How can it be a cardinal sin if you already died? But essentially, a pauper's grave and, hell and damnation, it wasn't, and if you were lucky, purgatory, it wasn't a good thing. However, just very quickly, I wrote another note, and you may think at a cursory glance that, I don't know if you can see the capitals in it, but essentially, when they looked at the note again, they realised that that's how they expected it to be written, and they read it quite quickly. However, when they slowed down, they realised there was a hidden message in capitals in the note. And like I said, I did this off the cuff, off my sleeve. Look to the mist, forgive me, and that's all the note says. And at which point they loved this because they thought it got quite sort of Cthulhu and quite, holy crap, this is not ended yet. And I'll come to this for the final part of this adventure in a moment.